one of you could have had this stuff ready, either one. So let me go ahead and Beth, share your question.
You want me to share my question?
Or why not?
Okay, who are you recruiting to come to the ESHIP summit virtually?
You want to call on somebody?
I'll pick on Peter.
Oh, oh, that's a good question. I've been trying to recruit actually several members of my board, and I've been actively talking to them about it. So we'll see how that turns out. And by the way, in terms of resurfacing, I've been resurfacing all weekend, but that's called spackling joint compounds and plaster. So on a deteriorated wall that we discovered has lead paint on it now. So we're trying to sort out what to do with it. And Norris, who are you inviting?
Someone will help me unmute. Two fronts. One is having some good conversations about various people here in Idaho. Some of what is being called the Coalition of the Unwashed, people from our new African American Chamber, our Women's Business Center, our Veterans Entrepreneur Group, and the Idaho Rural Partnership. This is sort of spinning out of Global Entrepreneurship Week proceedings, trying to get all the bottom up folks together, and that could be. We're thinking about setting up a watch party in advance, sort of bring people up to speed on what foolishness they've gotten involved in. The other group is we have 2 or 3 recruits already from this morning. Had a 2-hour online workshop that was a meeting of the minds. We brought together scholars, practitioners, policymakers to serve the Academy of Management's rather feeble attempts to do a virtual conference. But it was absolutely marvelous. Christina Theodoraki, who has been on a number of our calls, has just been total rock star. But there are a lot of people who are very intrigued. But that one good line was people thought it was ESHP, and that it was some sort of really weird Myers-Briggs typology. But it's been pretty exciting, is that people are, at least the people I'm talking to, seem very excited that we exist. And I think there was a misconception on some circles, is that this was a very exclusive aggregation of people, and quite the contrary, we're trying our damnedest to be inclusive. So getting that message out never hurts, and I think we're going to get some good folks. So now you got me really curious as to, since it was Beth's question, I'm not going to ask her. She'll have to go last and top all of us. But Katie, who are you inviting to the virtual summit?
Oh, so Katie, the check-in question is, who are you inviting to the ESHIP summit? And you came in just so that Norris got a chance to call on you.
Perfect timing. Our college has restricted all non-essential spending of any kind, which is why I don't have 2 people who were supposed to be hired to help me this year. So nobody from the school. However, I am inviting the local mayors to participate in the mayor's conference, because they should have some money.
Okay. Do you want to call on somebody?
As I'm late, so I don't know who went. Beth, have you gone already?
I've not.
Okay, I call on you.
Well, so kind of like you, I have my county executive and one of her administrators attending the mayor's conference, and trying to figure out a way to get to the folks at, and maybe this has already happened and I don't know it, the folks at the EDA get some representation there. And I'm always keeping my eyes peeled for the folks in the region, like the folks that are standing back up the innovation district, but haven't made any progress yet. David, you didn't go, did you? Long time no see, by the way.
I have not gone. I know it's been like a whole 40 minutes, something like that. All right, so we're doing, what are we up to too? Right. So I have like a JOB, but it's a pretty good one. But then I've also been dabbling in supporting a group called Good Startups, and doing some work with Forward Cities with them, and then working with Julo down in Florida too on some CEO training. So staying involved, and then just started re-engaging here with our local entrepreneurship and ways that I could support racial equity, improving just, all that here in town through that. I've been involved and I know those people. I just have never fully engaged, and recently felt like, well, shoot, I need to do more of that in my local town because I'm always in those conversations nationally. So, so that's been my little ecosystem building world. Hence the resurfacing. I sort of took a break as we were trying to figure out how to do COVID. So, but we sort of figured that out now. So as a family. And then who am I inviting? I haven't thought about that yet, but there are a bunch of people. One is my best friend from DC, who I've been trying to get into this ESHIP type work for several years, and now he has no excuse. He's actually coming to visit, so I'll put the full court press on him for that. And then there's just a couple usual suspects that I know sometimes go, sometimes don't. So I'm going to be pestering Allison Reedy, Anthony Watkins, some of those, the same people that I've just been chatting with anyway, because they need to come and be a part of it. So, and they usually want to be involved, and then it's like travel and stuff, and so now they have no excuse not to be there. So there's probably a list of like 10 or 15 people that I need to pester. Cecilia, you're it, right?
I am it. So I get to invite all of you. So that's
Wait
that's
a
always
minute.
fun.
No, that's cheating.
Yeah, that counts. Well, did you not see our call for presentations as well? I got to be involved in that. So actually, I will be inviting people from the local Tulsa ecosystem who I can't seem to get traction. And now, I don't know if all of you have seen, so Victor launched Right to Start, and Tulsa was the first segment. So there's a 32-minute video about ecosystem entrepreneurs in Tulsa as the first episode of Right to Start. And I'm hoping that that will catalyze a lot of people to be involved that haven't been involved before. I actually, and this is something that might be helpful for those of you who have been to the summit, know people who have been to the summit, wanting to engage others. I connected the new person in the Economic Development Office that's going to the Mayor's Conference on Entrepreneurship with somebody who had been to the ESHIP Summit last year and at the Mayor's Conference in Oklahoma City. So, so I took somebody and introduced them so that they would have a buddy to watch. So, so I like Norris's idea of a watch party, and depending on what your COVID restrictions and whatnot are, I also wanted to make sure that you had somebody who kind of does similar things to what you do, to have somebody to help process and jazz and riff on about, which is one of the wonderful things that happened at the ESHIP Summit in person that doesn't always happen in virtual settings, because then you watch all this content and you turn around to go say, hey, did you hear that? And there's nobody there. So hopefully that will engage some and spark some more conversations. So Katie, if
Yes.
you were able to invite people, because you want to invite people at the university, but you don't have a budget, is what you said.
Yeah, I would love to invite more people here from the college, because more and more I'm being asked to collaborate with other parts of the school. I have a collaboration with the barber school, the natural hair program, bilingual cosmetology, graphic design, English as a second language, and it's expanding. I would love to invite those department heads and instructors. And I would also love to invite some of my program teams. I've got 7 program teams, but these are community volunteers that make the launch programs work. So I know they're not going to pay out of pocket. So to come to this, and I would have to raise money, to pay their tuition.
So some of the segments will be available live, or like YouTube or Facebook. I think that's what we're the fire starters and things like that. Some of that content should be accessible, but let's see what we can help make happen. I like taking a page from Norris's book and saying, hey, maybe a watch party is in order so that it would cost a little bit less. And we're having discussions on how we can make that equitable. But if you know people, as in years past, we will be offering scholarships. So if you know anybody who would like to go, that we don't really want cost to be a barrier. This is a little different story because it's virtual. But if you, we would like to offer the opportunity for people to be able to engage in a scholarship. And I have this bug that keeps flying by my head. So it must be because I'm in the grass.
It could be. You have virtual bugs and virtual. I was mowing the lawn yesterday and I noticed the damselflies were getting perilously close to the lawnmower, and I couldn't figure, I couldn't shoo them off. It turns out they're eating the bugs that got kicked in the air by that. So I've trained the damselflies in the pasture. But since I stopped reading after I said, oh, we're getting comped as gold champion. What is the fee?
So that email should be coming out this week to let you know what all those fees are. We're still discussing 1 or 2 things, so I don't want to.
Well, can you give us a ballpark or a range?
It will be less than the in-person convening.
Well, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. As a gold champion, it was free, so it's less than that. That means you're paying us. No.
Right.
But one of the things that you guys, I don't know which call this came up on, is that if people are having trouble, I am sure that I'm getting in for free. I'm happy to contribute to somebody else. I may have to do that here, but we don't have to worry about our mayor. Our mayor genuinely believes new and small business are not important to the economy. So, and her predecessor came, and his economic development person came to a summit and spent time with us and with the mayor's conference, and went home thinking, oh, we're smarter than you guys, those guys. So that kind of depressing at one end, but on the other hand, it's building us some allies. When the mayor is excitedly saying that she intentionally excluded new and small business from her economic recovery task force, it took me a while to respond because I couldn't find a Kleenex. I was crying so hard, but it was,
wow.
But I imagine there are a lot of people out there. I mean, this smashing small business is very popular in certain political circles, and if the small businesses are all voting Republican, then Democrats feel it's okay to smash them, I guess. But I think there may be a way. If you guys have any thoughts of how I can lure somebody from city government to the mayor's thing, let me know. Unless it's closed.
Do they have a town that they compete with, like in your area?
No, we are Planet 8 at the center of the known universe.
Because I said if you found somebody they compared themselves with, and find out that they're coming.
Well, the problem is they either compare with Salt Lake City for theological reasons, or everybody wants to be Silicon potato. They want to be Silicon Valley, and we're having a massive influx of people who are being very disruptive in bad ways and in good ways. We don't really have a comparable Salt Lake would be the thing that everybody looks at, and it's not as high a bar as Silicon Valley, but it's, of course, Salt Lake City doesn't come to these things either. So,
Hold on.
but it's a good idea, Katie. I will percolate on that, because maybe some of the suburbs of Boise might be, they are very ambitious and rivalrous with each other. So that's actually a brilliant idea.
So that gives an interesting notion, right? So people who don't see the value and the worth of these things and are measured by KPIs. So that's what I wanted to introduce on this call. First of all, I wanted to make sure that I answer whatever questions that I can answer. So I don't have a definitive for you, Norris. And me giving you a range may not be helpful at this point, but we can definitely talk about the cost of an ESHIP summit, the ways that we can engage other people who aren't able to come if cost is a thing. As far as the mayor's conference is concerned, my understanding is that that's open for registration through the 31st of July from the last meeting that we were on. And anybody who works in a mayor's office, a senior mayor's staff, is welcome to attend. I believe, don't quote me on this, that for the people that work in an actual mayor's office, I don't know that there's a cost affiliated with that. So
here's a problem. Since I'm not a mayor, I don't get those mailings. Last time around, we tried to get a couple of county commissioners to attend, and they would have, but for the fact that they didn't have the budget to travel.
okay.
So I didn't know that there was a deadline on the 31st. Otherwise, I would be recruiting county commissioners and a few other people in City Hall to be part of this.
Okay,
I'm a little bit of, and folks at Kaufman knew that I was trying to do that last year. So I dropped off of somebody's radar on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I felt like I didn't get very good notice about the mayor's conference either. It wasn't really, I mean, there should have been a separate email that went out to everybody, because if it doesn't go to everybody, then they're just singing to the same people that's already in their sphere. They're missing all the mayors that are not already in their network. And there were no mayors. None of the 12 mayors in my county went to the previous conferences. None of them going to get anything from Kaufman because they haven't been there before. So I thought they did a very poor job of promoting the mayor's conference this year, as they did last year.
So I will relay that. I will relay that to the team. We don't actually, while we communicate with the team that organizes the mayor's conference, we are not the team that organizes the mayor's conference. So I sit in the design groups for the ESHIP summit, and then we do an overlap call because there is some overlap, but those invitations go out from a separate lead. So like Andy's the senior program manager over the ESHIP summit. Evan Apsher is the senior program manager, hi Mark, over the mayor's conference. And they work in collaboration with National League of Cities. So as a member of or related to National League of Cities, they would have gotten the invite through that network. And it's not something that that people signed up on the ESHIP Summit newsletter aren't on the mayor's conference newsletter because it's a whole separate track.
Okay, so now hold on a second.
Okay.
Spent all this time talking about ecosystem building.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing you tell me is how these people who are supposed to be part of the ecosystem are not part of the ecosystem. So they're getting information a totally different way, and it's not all connected. Do you see that?
I totally see that. There's
Okay.
a lot of integration that needs to happen, and it is happening. Things move very slowly. The link that that I'm the link that I put in here, the mayorsconference.kaufman.org, is the one, and I'll put it in there again for Mark, so that you have it as well.
Yeah, I apologize
So,
for being late, but
no, you're fine.
recap for me. I'll catch up. Norris is
Okay.
coming in.
Yeah, but
Hey, by the way, since Mark is here, what were you doing earlier today and you're going to be doing again later today?
Oh, today?
Oh, no, it's tomorrow. Oh, that's tomorrow, rather. Tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, he's going to be showing off his proposal to Joey Aurora's
Yeah,
SBIR event, AppWorks.
yeah.
Excellent.
That's why I'm there. Yeah, I've been plugged out for a little bit because I've been focused on this culture of innovation challenge, but lessons from there will help with the ecosystem building community we've been talking about.
so
Anyway.
So Celia, going back to the mayor's conference real quick. So last year I asked specifically about county level people, and I was told then that people were welcome. And in this case, it was a county commissioner who chairs the Commission on Social Innovation, but more broadly speaking, county people as well. And in a lot of jurisdictions, especially rural, it's the county that has the resources and not necessarily cities. And so for this to be focused on cities, when in fact the counties, in fact, are probably a more appropriate level of government in terms of ecosystem building because they have resources. The fact, just by going to the National Conference of National League of Cities, excludes all these counties and county execs.
That's a good point. We talked about this before as to why it's called the Mayor's Conference instead of something that's more inclusive.
Could be cities and counties conference. I mean, it doesn't have to be.
So why don't I have you do this, because I want to make sure that I get the wording right, so that when I share your input, that I can make sure that it's articulated effectively, particularly what Katie had mentioned and what you were talking about, Peter. If you can document that in the running agenda notes, then I can make sure to bring it to the attention of the people that are responsible for that. That would be super helpful. And I think, you know, the thing that we talk about in a lot of work, and I say this all the time when I do DEI work, that people know what they know and they don't know what they don't know, and they work in the systems that they're familiar with, and they talk to the connections that they're familiar with, which is very exclusive sometimes of people that could be engaged. So I think that, and you're right, Katie, this is exactly what ecosystem building is about, that we need to do a better job communicating with the people that we already have relationships with. That's a whole part of connected networks, and the reason that it needs to be elevated. That's a whole part of universal support, which Beth clearly articulated. It's being able to send that message out together. I think that for the past 3 years, we've been playing around with this in certain ways, and sometimes we don't see it because we're assuming things happen, or we just don't know what's going on, or that we thought somebody assumed that somebody would tell somebody else, or somebody else had thought that, and what gets revealed is that, oh, unless you articulate it, sometimes it hasn't been said. Well, people assume that it's been said. So I'm sorry that there are the disconnections, but that's exactly why we need to have these conversations. And then
And
we need to be able to.
does anybody know what the fee for the registration is? Because apparently it's a secret. You can't see it until you start registering with the code.
With the mayor's conference,
Uh-huh.
I believe, I will double check and get you the response to that, but I believe that the mayor's offices are invited and those costs are covered.
Yeah. See, it doesn't even say that. It already assumes that everybody who comes to and does this already knows the deal, already is on the inside, already understands how this works. So I could not even go advocate for this. And I've just got this information last week, by the way, from Kim McGrew. I can't even go advocate for this without complete information.
Okay, so if I can get you the complete information, and I will try to do that today and tomorrow, so that you have time to at least follow up. And then if we need to figure out, since you get the information late, that we need to make an exception on the deadline, that we can ask for it, that at least I can put in that request. Because, I mean, remembering that I'm a consultant for the Kauffman Foundation, I don't work there. So I still have to work through some channels in order to get this message kind of shared. So whatever information that I can help share to support those efforts, I'm very happy to, in whatever ways that I can, and then and put you in touch with the people that need to be put in touch with. So
Julie, I just added my comments.
Great, thank you, Peter. Much appreciated, and I will follow up with you and Katie and whoever else would like to be followed up with. As far as updating on what else is going on, there's the call for presentations, which you should have gotten the notice on. Hang on one second. It's really loud in this room with air conditioning on, and I can't believe I need air conditioning, but there's a heat wave in Rhode Island, which means that it's 90 degrees, which is definitely different from what I'm used to in Tulsa. So
you never know where you are. You're virtual.
Oh, I am. I'm currently in Narragansett, Rhode Island, enjoying the cooler weather, ish. So I'm really excited, Mark, about the thing that you're working on with AFWorks. I know Norris. There's a question I wanted to ask in relationship to this call and metrics, and whether or not that's something that we can explore. But before we go there, are there any other updates that we want to share? Any questions about upcoming summit? The summit invite registration should be coming out this week in the email. So as long as you're signed up, which you all are, you should get an invite to the ESHIP summit. And then the call for presentations, the deadline is the beginning of August. So if you have something that you would like to present on, or think that there's somebody who is, who should be nominated, please do nominate them. That link has come out, and if you need more information on that, I've shared it in Slack, I've shared it on the Facebook channel, and you should have received an email. Is there anything else that we want to update or talk about before we dive into something else?
Well, this morning we had a virtual research workshop, a meeting of the minds research workshop for the Academy of Management, who did a terrible job of their going virtual. And by the way, the virtual registration is $200 instead of $300. What a lovely discount, which for 10,000 delegates they needed 2 million, and they said, oh, we have to pay for the software. It was like, oh God. But had just an absolutely marvelous array of practitioners and scholars talking with each other from around the globe. The great thing about any virtual summit is we can reach out far beyond the normal crowd. So I'm grieving that, for the people who are not getting news about the mayor's conference and all that, because we have people, calling in from places that they would never be able to afford or would never be able to participate, whether as presenter or as attendee. And it's marvelous to see the interest in that. You had some spirited arguments about metrics, so that'll be apt. But I think that we've got some new recruits probably for the summit. But I think we're getting the gospel of ESHIP out out in the world. And so even though Kaufman can't pay for stuff outside of the U.S., but people could still come and attend. And a lot of these people do have budgets. So
Great, thank you. And Norris is like the evangelist of ecosystem building, ESHIP stuff, for sure. So we appreciate that.
Hallelujah, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the Church of the Entrepreneur. Can I have an amen? And usually people throw things at that point, but
well, then we're really glad that it's a virtual environment, so that you don't get hit by stuff. So I want to touch on my question for all of you. I want to touch on some stuff that Mark had mentioned coming in, and there's a talking about the language that we put information in for people to resonate with the work that we're doing. So traditional economic development has defined metrics that are around, KPIs, number of jobs, profitability, all of those things that have been defined and refined and agreed upon for years. The conversations that we have around ecosystem building is that ecosystem building is the nice to have, it's the woo-woo, it's the stuff that people can't necessarily see and measure. Is there a way that we can engage around, because I can't show you how many friendships and working relationships have come out of these calls unless you have a project. I can't show you the strength of network in that you have people that you can now reach out to get responses and to work on what's next and all of those things. I mean, one of the things that Christine and I talked about this afternoon was how we can maybe show progress. For those of you who were at the 2017 ESHIP Summit, there was the history of the future, visualization, and what we hoped to see coming out of ecosystem building. And last year we had some kind of an art installation, although we were hoping that it would be more interactive, that we might be able to work on virtually, talking about the things that have come out of engagements that you've had around the ESHIP goals community. But so my question for all of you is, what is it that we can do because sustainability is about, a lot of the times about showing your work. So what is it that we can do to figure out how we validate and affirm the things that we've worked on to show our work, like what Felicia Thatcher calls your receipts, right? So you're able to tangibly show that something has come out of it to validate and affirm this ecosystem building stuff that we do.
Well, I think we're going to have to come up with some indicators, just like the economic development guys. I mean, what we hear is when they landed a big elephant for their community, right? But when they report to their stakeholders, they don't wait until they've landed a big elephant to tell them anything. They're reporting on things that are indicators of their activity level, of their success. We just got to decide what those indicators are, which means that we have to decide Eventually, we have to stop the endless conversations and decide what those indicators are, and then just start measuring them.
Norris?
I'm
I
sorry,
know that
I can't get, my progress goal was figuring out when I'm on and off mute. Be a win for me. But Katie, you're spot on. I think that there is actually a whole school of sort of metrics as the kind of, are we there yet? But instead of that, are we on the right path? What are when you have even in human resources, if you've got uncertain, murky, relatively rare phenomena, waiting for the outcomes may be too late. But what are the right behaviors? Like, okay, I can't predict how many new clients I'm going to add, but I can count how many cold calls I made. That being able to document the effort and any small wins along the way. Like, we got to do this thing this morning because last year we had a similar workshop, and we had four new research partnerships that started, several publications, and 2 people got jobs. That's not quite what we're looking at, but being able to document what you are doing and weaving that into a great story can't hurt. But I think you're right. What can we say? All right, how can we demonstrate we have project toward, like, goal 1, the Kaleidospeak 2.0? How can we document that, yes, we are taking concrete steps, and we shouldn't be self-serving. They shouldn't be vanity metrics, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to find honorable ways to toot our own horn.
So there are 2 sets of issues. One is the activity of doing the ecosystem building, and what are the metrics for that? And then there is the actual activity of entrepreneurship, which is a separate set of metrics. They're connected, but the first may not be causing the second. It may be related. You can be saying that you're using it's the environment, whatever. So in the first group, you could do things like, numbers of mentions in local newspapers about certain events that are related to ecosystem building. Or you can have, attendance in a community college course or courses related to entrepreneurship. Or you can have numbers of contacts and so forth, or, community events. There are any number of things that you could set up as sort of process metrics that give you a sense of activity. And then in terms of the entrepreneurship, obviously startups, things of that nature, it's harder, if they're not incorporating. So, trying to figure out how you can pick up activities before people incorporate as a business or as an enterprise gets a little tougher. And then ultimately, and this goes back into the ecosystem building, things like, success rates, years in business, growth measures, but then again, also activities in which the entrepreneurs are using the ecosystem to advance themselves. So I think there are any number of these metrics that you could devise. I think it has to be pretty situational to the place, but a service could be to sort of provide a list or examples or a catalog of metrics that are possible.
How far down the road are we on that possibility?
Muted. I'm sorry. Sorry, I was muted too. Like Norris, my performance objective should be to figure out when to be on mute and when not. I also say that once we agree on what the metrics are, then we just need to provide a way for people to measure them and submit their data so it can be rolled up.
I like the idea of the catalog, though.
One
Catalog
of
of
those things that these conversations seem to be pointing to is
You're frozen, Cecilia.
Yeah, we're losing you.
It's hot up there, but you're frozen.
Heat exhaustion from the.
Is anyone hearing me?
Yeah,
I
I
can
hear.
hear, but
we
hear
Cecilia's
that.
frozen. I think we're good, but Cecilia's
I-
frozen.
Beth, I agree. That's a good question. Is like, where are we at on that list? You know, what's the short list that we know? Hey, these 5 metrics are useful. These next 10 may be useful. Here's a batch of vanity metrics that we might want to start tracking anyway, even though we know we're made up.
Agreed.
You know, because I think it wouldn't be hard. I've thought about this a bunch. I've been talking with Tom and his crew for a while about this, about how to measure such things. And there's certainly some things that we could do that would be correlative. He's certainly open to that, but his problem with it was that most of the metrics that would be useful are long form metrics, if that makes sense. They aren't words, but it's hard to really make them quantitatively useful, except for correlative things. So to find metrics that actually are causal, you know, we can go when this happens, this will happen, instead of like in areas where this happens, this seems to happen too. We don't really know why. And he's not confident that we can get much more than that unless we really dig in and do like, that's a lot more work than I think we're up for. So, but even if we could get those, like these 5 actually are good because they will help us advance the field, but also, you know, they really do correlate that if you see these kinds of connections happening, this kind of activity happening at certain levels, you know, what does that mean? How do we measure that? And not just the list, but with those 5, it's like, how do you get that data? Because I think that's a secondary problem is it's great if you've got a metric, but how do you get people to get it to you? How do you make sure you get it, that it's honest? Like that second set of things. Cause I mean, I don't know. I could report data for somewhere and make it up. And people will make it up when they don't have it. So I think that's the issue with this is it's tough. I wish I had 3 gold standard ones that we could just say, please, let's just get these to start with or something.
Well, and I have a really good example of, you know, we were focusing on changing the culture in the region to be much more conducive to entrepreneurship. And how we did that was our micro global awareness campaign across the region. We knew that our small business development center and our seed funders were complaining that they had too many people now walking through their doors to get help. Could we get from them how many came in last year and how many came in this year? No. Number 1, they didn't want to play. Number 2,
they're not tracking that data.
No.
Nobody's tracking
Well,
it.
Well, the example would be the small business development centers have a very well-honed metric, which is largely vanity, but basically everybody who comes through that they communicate with, they get a point. Every hour they spent, they get a point. And it's no assessment of how productive they are. It's just, it's sheer quantity. And they are allowed to count. If I refer somebody, if SBDC would refer somebody to me and I spent 3 hours with them, they still get to count that my 3 hours, which is it's very self-serving, but it's been very good for their budgets. But controlling, I hate to use that word, but sort of controlling the narrative, what are the right variables? For instance, you can go from PitchBook and Crunchbase and you can say, okay, here's how many investment deals happened in your city, your state. And those numbers these days is everywhere. Everybody gets to look good because there's so much seed funds, formal venture capital flying around. But the underlying assumption is what matters are future potential unicorns. That it's, that saying we don't, again, we don't really, it's nice that there are lots of startups and small businesses, but all we care about are these big home runs. This up in the city of Boise and the state of Idaho, great difficulty just keeping up with how many startups there are, even though that data is actually, if you have a payroll, you've got unemployment, we got you. but the Department of Labor and the Department of Commerce don't talk to each other, blah. But giving our ecosystem builders this tools, what I'm hearing from Katie and you all is figuring out, I think maybe we go to ESHIP Nation and say, what kind of data would help you, and other than jobs, and sadly jobs is actually a lagging indicator on top of all this, but the narrative is going to be driven by, the metrics are, what's the expression, you get what you measure. And if we're measuring how many, venture capital deals as opposed to, how many solopreneurs or how many family businesses, that the incentives are going to get tipped that way. But the media is going to follow that. And
yeah, I totally agree, Norris. That's part of what I was saying. Like our metrics list, they may be the ones that we are actually encouraging people to start looking at, even though we know it's just correlative or vanity. We put that higher up because at least it's advancing what we know is better for the field, better for equity, what, fill in the blank, right? And so we may have a couple that we know are really useful, and others that we just know we want to get the word out and people start watching, because then they'll realize like, oh shoot, we aren't reaching this whole demographic. Great.
Yeah.
Well, as long as people actually want to reach that demographic, sometimes
well, at least I want them to know they aren't.
Well, and that's that point, right? And that goes back to sort of what Peter was saying earlier, right? There's two levels of it, right? There's the systematic broad level view metrics.
Yeah.
But when we have these metric conversations, we always go, and I've spent a lot of time talking to Tom too, but like PitchBook and Crunchbase are not going to capture system level stuff, right? They're not going to capture looking across the system. They'll capture locality and they'll tell us stuff we sort of already know and just give us more numbers to it. But if we say, okay, how many entrepreneurs are actively engaging in a community, in a place, in a zip code, that's this type of stuff that the census doesn't even capture this stuff, right? Because typically people go to census data when you get this nationwide system view, and you don't do that. So there's the Startup Genome Report, there's the stuff, other materials that Global Entrepreneurship Network put out, but it still doesn't capture what we need, right? And a lot of the stuff is loosey-goosey. It's event-driven. How do you put a metric on social capital, right? How do you put a metric on interactions and network connections and how those turn into deals?
And how do we tie those together, right?
Right.
Mark, if we've got that other data, the question that I always end up with is like, how do we show that areas where there's more connectivity, however we choose to measure that,
right,
equals this higher,
right,
engagement score, whatever you want to give it. Yeah, that's the big question.
Ted Zoller and Marianne Feldman down in North Carolina actually did some pretty in-depth social network analysis, and they were actually looking at what they called the deal makers,
right,
the super connectors, and things like, okay, you plug in a new super connector into the into the economy. What happens to the network? Well, the super connector connects with a lot of people, but what was interesting is people were other connections were happening more frequently and more productively, even if the super connector never talked to them. But there was a modeling effect of that. So I mean, there's historical data from other places that you can use as. I mean, this is not inexpensive to do. It's probably less expensive than Startup Genome, but I'm thinking is that there is an angle here, and it's like it's on the tip of my tongue, and I can't articulate it. But I think the value of, I tell you what, I would call Crunchbase, I would call PitchBook. The guy, well, it used to be the chief data guy at Crunchbase used to be named Kaufman. He's not with them anymore, but I wonder if they'd be interested. I don't think either of them are NRPs, but maybe it's worth seeing if they'd like to partner on this, because this could be a huge value add for them, because they're looking to tap the economic development market. One of the things that Chad Renando has keeps reminding us that there's actually a lot of data out there that we don't realize is out there, partly because it's labeled weirdly. A lot of the data is only annual, but that's certainly better than nothing.
Oh, I
Because
think
the government actually counts the gig economy, the
Yeah.
1099 economy.
Very poorly, and 1099 isn't a very good indicator.
No.
But because there's a whole bunch of other stuff that flies under the radar of 1099s, including, by the way, Uber drivers, because they have to hit $40,000 before there's a 1099 that's reported on them, because it's a third-party payer. So there's all sorts of data problems, and frankly, if you look at the implementation of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program that was put out there this year, the states are in mass confusion because they have no way of verifying who's out there doing gig work. But aside from that, I think that we're being a little bit limited in terms of looking at what the ecosystem is. And I think I used on a different call the example in Pittsburgh where, you know, it was an initiative around makers, and the makers were companies that were basically startups in robotics. So that's the entrepreneurship in theory. But in order for that entrepreneurship to work, it needed, you know, these businesses needed suppliers. So connecting them to suppliers is an important piece. Now, what this Makership project did was that they also set up a system where they would figure out with the entrepreneur what their supply chain should look like, what sorts of components, how do you price the components, things of that nature. Now that's part, in my mind, that's part of doing the ecosystem for them. How do you engage the larger system so that business can succeed? How do they bid out, you know, components and things of that nature, verify quality and that sort of thing. So I think it's if we only look at the interaction or the activity of the entrepreneur as the indicator of success or failure without taking into account all the other things that entrepreneur needs to get connected to in order for that person or business to succeed, then I think we're sort of being too narrow in the metrics.
Oh, if I didn't explain that well, I totally agree. That's what I was saying about connecting those two metrics. I think I think we use the data that's there, right, on entrepreneurship, right? We know some indicators on that. That's fine in general. Activity and things. They're not all great, but we've got some. But we don't know, and that's why I'd be curious about what this group did. Where were they? In Carolina somewhere you were talking about?
University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
So it'd be great to find out, Norris, if you could find out for us, how did they measure the impact of that superconnector? How did they?
The striking thing was the graphic.
Peter, if they put that together if we could put that kind of measuring of interconnectedness, right? Whatever that, and there's lots of ways, whether it's between different verticals, whether it's between foundations and the entrepreneurs, whether, you know, whatever it is, there's lots of ways we could look at that. But if there's somebody that figured out one piece of that even was just on superconnectors and then the resultant impact, if we could take that and match it to data, we'd find out, did this impact, does this correlate at least, right? Which is what Tom's brought up, that maybe we could find correlation, which is good. That's better than nothing. That would be a starting place. But I think we need to hunt down these people like Norris has found that actually have recorded any metric for connectedness, because those are pretty much made up in my experience so far. Because it's hard to judge, like, how connected is Chattanooga? I don't know. It's a happy place. You know, that's what they all sound like to me.
Does all of Chattanooga have to be connected? I mean,
no, and that's right. What are the indicators that we want? How do we need what pieces to be connected? You're right. And how do we
I think you can have I think you can have an ecosystem that is very small, and that ecosystem can be connected to other ecosystems. I think we keep trying to boil the ocean here. My ecosystem in Wake County is connected to other ecosystems outside of Wake County. But also my little ecosystem here in Holly Springs is its own separate thing. It's a bubble connected to the other bubbles. And if I tried to measure everything at one time, I get stuck.
Yeah.
I don't have any control over all that stuff. I can control what I measure right here, my thing.
Yeah.
If you're next door to me and you're measuring the same thing, well, we can now combine our numbers and we can measure both your thing and my thing together.
Right.
I think if we just get down to the real nitty gritty, like my place is a pond. A pond is an ecosystem. We measure what's in that pond. Then maybe we could measure what's in the patch of grass next to the pond. Then we can measure what's in the forest next to the patch of grass that's next to the pond. And if we all measure the same things, we roll that up. Now we got a big number.
Yep. No, I think you're right. 100% on that.
David, to your point that Ted and Marianne, if you just, the graphic does, the before and after graphs are pretty striking. But there's a whole field of social network analysis that they've been studying this for a long time and measuring the quantity and the quality.
I'd love to advise us.
I'll send you some links on that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, obviously, you're still hostage to the, to getting accurate reports from the people involved. But it's been well honed, and the good news is, if we were having this conversation 15 years ago, I said, this is great, except God can't do the math. Well, now, you just hit a button on your laptop and it does it. We've gotten better. The other part is the qualitative thing that you can get at. There are, at the margin, there's two kinds of connectors. There's the, some call them a hub, someone who is a proactive, professional, unselfish connector, a true liaison animateur. And then there are people who think they're connectors, but they're actually gatekeepers controlling resources. That they think they're connectors, but they're actually deciding who gets access, whether it's data, money, access to the mayor's office. It's, but simply being able to, we could survey the entrepreneurs in your community and say, who are the connectors, who are the gatekeepers? And might get a real sense if there are a lot more gatekeepers visible than connectors, that's probably not good. But what I found when I've tried doing it here in Idaho is the connectors I find, well, let's say the bad news is we find more rat bastard gatekeepers than we thought, but we find a hell of a lot more unselfish connectors than we realized, especially in these smaller towns. There's always somebody. And I mean, and they're intrinsically motivated. It's not their job description. They're not getting hired to be a connector. They just do it. And if you can identify those people, now that's one hell of a subject pool to understand the situation. Those are the people you want to tap into. I'm sorry.
Okay, so
too much coffee today.
It all goes back to the fact that I think before I got cut off, I was leaning towards we're coming to the points in conversations where the overlaps and the interdependencies are just becoming more and more pronounced, where the need for cross conversations are evolving. So getting metrics involved in thinking about this from the metrics hat, right? All the people that think about these things, connected with the people that are thinking about how we create sustainable work, talking to the people that can get the messaging out about that. Because again, when you define the metrics that you're wanting to seek, then we seem to grow attention and the need and the recognition for all those things. So it's good that we're coming up on this point in time where we're coming up to the next ESHIP summit. I want you to start thinking about what those kinds of things look like if we can have cross goal conversations. I think that this is the evolution of where these conversations are going. But that's just my assumption. I need to hear from all of you who are taking part in these calls, what would be beneficial. I believe that it's been really good and healthy to have 8 conversations because you got to hone in and laser focus on those particular things. Now it seems that it would be a really good time to think about what 3-4 conversations instead are, where we talk about projects or we talk about how one group can help another, or creating teams of people who will take the information that they've seen, talk about other groups and resources. How do we align those things to start getting it so it starts to become campaigns and movements and motions and all kinds of things. So, so think about that. I'd love to hear from you. What you as a community find of value is going to greatly influence the kind of reporting that we do in order to figure out what comes next. So I will look forward to speaking with all of you soon. Let me give you back the rest of the, and then I know I have to follow up with Peter and Katie. Does anybody else need me to follow up with them on mayor's conference stuff?
Nope. I got to run.
Okay.
See y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Rest of your day. Thank you so much for all your brain space. I'm excited because you know what? We're solving some stuff. We're asking much better questions. So take care. Bye.